All right, welcome. I'm Janet here from Drala Mountain Center, and I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Holecek. Andrew will be teaching a program here at DMC this August called Death and the Art of Dying, Deep Dive into the Luminous Bardo. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Janet. Nice to spend some time with you. I appreciate it.
Lovely to spend some time with you as well. So, um, I know part of the description of the program is how, from a spiritual perspective, death is the crowning moment of life. The karma that brought you into this life is exhausted, and the karma or habits that will propel you into the next one hasn't yet formed. The gap or bardo provides a golden opportunity for rapid spiritual progress if you are prepared. So tell me about that. I'm fascinated.
Ah, yeah, well, it's really kind of the great opportunity of studying these remarkable Bardo teachings is precisely that if one, in fact, is prepared, then it really does become quite literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And one of the reasons it does that is that as you alluded to, the habit patterns, the karma that really, if you believe in the sort of thing that propelled one involuntarily into this particular scenario, that is quite literally exhausted. And that's what death is. It's the exhaustion cessation of the particular stream of habit patterns that brought you in. And while we're still under the sway of these habit patterns, which are monumental, I mean, they're lodged in our unconscious mind, they're lodged in our subtle body, and they massively, massively dictate, constrict, limit what we do in this life. And so as we start to age, get sick, and then eventually enter the bardos, then I guess one way to look at it is and this is a really helpful view, is that everything that's lost at the level of matter, like our bodies, our mental, our cognitive faculties at the rough level, all the things that we see when we look in the mirror after we turn age 27 or something, right? What is lost at the level of material processes is actually gain at the level of kind of spiritual vectors. And so with this proper attitude, then you realize that in this fluid environment, you have tremendous opportunities. And so one classic analogy that's given that I think is helpful is, imagine that you had a massive tree stump on land, this big honking sequoia, that would take 50 people to move. Well, if you take that same massive stump and you put it in a body of water, I mean, one person can move it. So it's that liquidity, it's that fluidity, what the Buddhists call emptiness. There's both a blessing and a curse. It's a curse if you're not ready, because then what happens is the ground is pulled out from underneath you, you fundamentally panic. In fact, the analogy I give, and I think it's a good one, is not that long ago, we had a little snowstorm here in Colorado where I live, and I was walking down this ramp. It's kind of a little tapered ramp and had handrails off to the side, but I wasn't holding on to them. And sure enough, I hit a patch of ice and my feet just went right out from underneath me. And in that moment of complete slipping, I just instantly, reflexively shot my arms out and in a moment of panic, grabbed the guardrails as a way to keep myself from falling. Well, what the Bardo teachings say that in a similar way, when the rug, which really the ultimate rug, is pulled off from underneath you, which is your body, it's like, right, really, when you think about it, what are we, not metaphorically, but what are we literally attached to? Well, this thing, right? My mind is attached to this body. And so bardos are defined by this level of groundlessness when the rugs of our experience are pulled out. And so the ultimate rug really is the very ground of our body. And so that's the rug that's pulled out. And so if you're prepared for the groundlessness, for the emptiness, for the openness, then instead of reflexively shooting your arms out to grab, which is somewhat metaphoric of what happens involuntarily, reflexively, when those bad habit patterns kick back into gear to hurl us back into another body, another form. But if you're trained to work with that groundlessness, then when the rug of your body is pulled out, instead of panicking and contracting back into form, you learn how to fly and dance in space, right? And so that's really the great gift. What is lost at the level of form is gained at the level of spirit. And so therefore, they talk about 3 levels of relationship, or highest, middling, and kind of lower level practitioners. One is the highest level really looks forward to the moment of death, not in a weird kind of masochistic suicidal way, but simply because they realize they have so much to look forward to. And so that's no small thing. And so what we do in the program that I'll be presenting is we go through this in just tremendous detail using the extraordinary sophistication of the map of the Tibetan tradition. And then really most importantly, giving practices, introducing meditations that allow one to prepare, because meditation, favorite definition these days, is habituation to openness, which is really, in this rendering, a kind of a familiarity, habituation to spaciousness, emptiness. And so therefore meditation is just death in slow motion. And so what we do is we go through this. This particular program is on the deepest of all the bardos, which I can say a little bit more about in a second, the Bardo Dharmata. But that's really the biggest thing, is that all these habit patterns, it's like the other analogy they give is when you're in the after death state and everything is so fluid, malleable, porous, empty. It's another analogy is like your mind body, very subtle body, is like molten metal. It hasn't formed yet. And the minute you enter the Bardo becoming, and then the Bardo life, and your mind is, so to speak, poured back into a form, then it reifies, it concretizes, and then you're stuck. Until you die, you're stuck. And so death is becoming temporarily unstuck until the habit patterns kick back in. And so if you're prepared, whoa, this is a tremendous opportunity. But only if you're prepared. It's funny, you can't really put the fear of creator principle into practitioners of the Buddhist tradition, but you can put the fear of habit, karma, into you, right? So your habit patterns come into play if you're not prepared. And then what are they going to do? They're just going to reflexively hurl you back into another form ad infinitum. And according to the wisdom traditions, that's what creates the cycle of endless involuntary rebirth. Long answer to a good question, or a good statement.
Right. So you just mentioned the Bardo of Dharmata, and is that the same as the Luminous Bardo?
It is. It is the same as the Luminous Bardo Dharmata, and this is the deepest of the 3 death bardos, right? So there's what's called the painful bardo of dying, which is called painful because it hurts to let go. That's just basically what everybody goes through in 8 stages. We review that, of course, in this program. And then at the moment, at the end of the 8th dissolution, then one returns to the Dharmata, which is Sanskrit for basically, isness, suchness, reality. You basically return to the matrix of reality. And it's called luminous because in my languaging, this is where all heaven breaks loose, right? Not all hell. All hell breaks loose on the Bardo of becoming. All heaven breaks loose in the Bardo Dharmata. And so many people listening may be familiar with the famous Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is where they talk about the 100 peaceful, wrathful deities, these legendary archetypal representations of the awakened mind that unfold. And so in the program, we talk a lot about what these, ladies and gentlemen, are like. What really are these archetypal deities? How do they manifest, not only then, but in life? How do the deities manifest now? Will everybody experience them? Will they experience them the same way? Who doesn't experience them? But the idea here is that these deities they represent the thermonuclear power of the awakened mind. And the luminosity is actually very interesting. The luminosity is so brilliant. It's virtually synonymous with emptiness. And this is what we centrifuge out in the course, because these are the 2 of the deepest topics in all of Buddhism, luminosity and emptiness. They're basically flip sides of the same phenomena. But fundamentally, it represents the kind of blazing power of the awakened mind. And again, if we're not prepared for it, that power is so brilliant. They talk about it as the bright lights. The power and the shine of the awakened mind is so brilliant that in a really compelling way, we contract away from it. Again, if we're not prepared. It's like if you were exposed to a really, colloquially, and again, the light in the Dharmata is not the same as physical light, but it's also not different. Somewhere in there is the truth. But it's as if you were exposed to a really intense bright light. Everything just contracts. You pull away, you contract, and as you contract, this is what I call the primordial contraction. It also serves as a primordial distraction. So to distract, I love word origins. To distract, etymologically, literally means to pull apart. And so the primordial distraction, of which everything that we know in our everyday lives is just an echo or recapitulation of that, the primordial distraction, pulling apart from reality, takes place in the Bardo. And we do so, we pull away because it's just too much. There's no place for personal identity in that space. It's too, the truth is too bright. That's what the bright lights represent, by the way. They represent the really bright light of truth. And so what I try to emphasize in this program, in addition to the archetypal representation of the Bardos at the end of life, kind of as a cultural translation, I try to point out how these Bardos are taking place right here and right now. And so every time we're faced with a moment of truth, if we stay with that truth, that's staying with the bright lights. If we shy away into our usual comfortable habitual patterns, that's what's called straying into the soft lights. And so we're straying into the soft lights all the time. Every single time we're literally distracted. So what becomes really interesting is this kind of bidirectional thing that we distract or contract in the Bardo after death because we distract, contract in life, and we contract in life because we contract in the Bardo. So it's this kind of bootstrap bidirectional thing. And so therefore, if we work with distraction, contraction, in its most immediate iterative fashion, which is every moment of distraction, this is how we start to prepare for the big distraction that will take place at the end of life when truth is blazingly laid out, the Dharmata is blazingly laid out without the mediation of the body. And there, again, we'll contract, distract in the most kind of primordial way as a way to fundamentally get away from that reality, that truth. The truth that doesn't include personal identity. Ego doesn't fit in that space. And that's, in fact, why we contract. Ego contracts out of fear. And so what we explore in the program is a lot of this really cool stuff, cool for me, about the nature of fear. Like, where does fear come into the Bardos? And then how is this fear operative even right here and right now? Because this fear hasn't gone anywhere. We attempt to get away from it moment to moment. We attempt to get away from it in the Bardos. But out of sight is not out of mind. Out of sight is into the unconscious mind. And so therefore, in a very real way, this deep, bright, brilliant light of the Dharmata, it's within us. I mean, that's what's revealed when we die, is all the superficial layers, again, all the things that they call the adventitious defilements. When all those are taken away, that blazing light is actually what's revealed. And so what's super interesting is our avoidance strategies even now towards this light, the way we distract ourselves through active laziness, through all the ways we colloquially just pull our ways away from the present moment. Ego's working to avoid the truth of this radiant, brilliant light within us. And so in the program, we point this out at the level of the map, and then practices are given to allow people to have a direct experience of this, again, as a way to prepare for this extraordinary opportunity that awaits us. And this is the most important thing. This whole death business, death only exists in the realm of form. If you believe in matter, and if you believe in form, and that's what ego is, exclusive identification with form, then death is what we in the West impute it to be, this really scary, kind of not so cool thing. But if you understand, what Marie Curie said so beautifully, 2 Nobel Prizes, right, in physics and chemistry, nothing in life is to be feared, it's only to be understood. And so we're afraid of death because we don't understand it. It's really that simple. The darkness of ignorance obscures this, and so we're afraid of it. And so with the strength of the wisdom tradition supporting us and the practicalities of the meditations that implement these teachings, then we develop a deep conviction courage in terms of understanding who we are, that this kind of true nature, all the fake news. Another way to say this is all this fake news will be taken away when we die, and real news is exposed. Real news. And so then the issue is, are you prepared for this real news? Well, according to the wisdom teachings, if you haven't done some preparatory work, no, you're not going to be prepared. And then just like in a non-lucid dream, and this is the other thing I bring in big time in this program, is the relationship of sleeping, dreaming to dying. Because we recapitulate this process every single night when we fall asleep. When we fall into deep dreamless sleep, we're falling into a similitude or a concordant expression of the Dharmata. And so if we understand that, then we realize, wow, I've got yet another opportunity to prepare. I can prepare not only in my meditations during the day, I can prepare with my nocturnal meditations at night, lucid dreaming, dream yoga, sleep yoga. And then, boy, then you're good to go. I mean, then you've created all these really, really good habit patterns, or at the highest levels, really just removed all pattern habits altogether. So that when, it's not always bad news in the unconscious mind. So when all these habits come up, it's not all bad news. I mean, there's so many different layers of the unconscious mind. And so we talk about that, 6 different levels of the unconscious mind. It's not all junk in there. Really, really deep down in that mind is what's called the emergent unconscious, the ground unconscious. And that's really beautiful, good stuff. And so if we understand that, we start replacing the bad habits with the good habits. We start to understand the truth of the inner dimensions of our being, then we're good to go. It's like my dear friend Robert Thurman, who I teach a lot with. He says something really beautiful. He says, it's not safe to die as long as you have an unconscious mind. Well, it's not safe to die if that unconscious mind is stuffed with all these bad habits. But if you install all these pop-ups, mixing metaphors, you put in your unconscious mind all these brilliant practices and teachings, well, then that comes up when you die, just like in a dream. I mean, think about it. When you're dreaming in a non-lucid dream, a normal dream, what controls the dream if you don't? Your habits. Your habits. They control your dream. In the Tibetan arena, death is literally referred to as the dream at the end of time. And so therefore, you can use the nighttime dream to prepare for the dream at the end of time, where the habits that come up to control your after-death journey then are really good habits. They're habits of lucidity, they're habits of awareness, they're habits that you can take refuge in, that will then actually, in some way, lay a red carpet for you. So that when you actually make this transition, again, instead of freaking out, you go, wow, like the great masters often say, paraphrasing, what's it going to be like this time? What's this journey of the mind going to be like this time? Because that's really what it is. Death is just a journey of the heart mind. And we can take that journey before we die. And the great meditation masters have all done it. There's a classic maxim. You'll find it in Sufism. You'll find it in Christian mysticism. If you die before you die, then when you die, you will not die. So this program is about dying before you die. It's about letting go of all these false levels of identification, transitioning your identity while you're still alive to these truer, deathless aspects of your being. That's the kicker, because right now we don't know it because we're so living on superficial levels and lost in distraction and really skimming across the surface of life, all in a way, for ego to distract away from these deeper truths. But if you understand the full spectrum of your identity, who you really are, and then not only understand it, but actually experience it with these meditations, then you realize this is exactly what happens every night when I fall asleep in a kind of microcosmic form. This is what happens every night at the dream at the end of time. I'm just going to drop away from all this surface chop, all this ridiculous, superficial skimming dimensions of my being into the truest dimensions of who I am. And then death becomes then, wow, fantastic joyride. Then you can control the winds of habit. You can control the whole thing. And this is what makes the Buddhist tradition different from other traditions at the end of life. Because in this tradition, the point, if you believe in this stuff, the point is not to get out of the whole rebirth thing. Not at all. There's nothing wrong with rebirth. The problem is involuntary rebirth driven by habitual patterns, karma, samskaras, whatever terms you want to use. So the idea here is to replace this habitual, reflective, contractive rebirth process driven of ignorance, fear, and not knowing fundamentally, with rebirth driven by love, kindness, and compassion. And so therefore the cycle continues to play out. You still take form, you still take on an everyday level, you still reincarnate with your speech, you reincarnate with your thoughts, with your actions, but now you do so driven by love, kindness, and compassion. And so that again is it's the really great gift of these practices and teachings is to use the preparatory practices for the end of life as a way to show you you're always in a bardo. The deities are already appearing all the time. Every time emotions arise up, the deities are appearing. Every single thing that takes place in the bardo is taking place right here and right now. We just don't see it because we're skimming. So we use the end of life teachings to show like, whoa, this is really pretty amazing. I mean, I'm actually cycling through these every single night through the arising, abiding, cessation of every single thought. And then now you start to see the extraordinary kind of cash value of these teachings. They help you tremendously. And I think just as much, if not more so, they really help you when others are dying. They help you bring your stability, your confidence, your ease. You can be of tremendous benefit around others when they're slipping and falling and panicking and freaking out. Your confidence, stability, because their storylines may be different when they die, but the mind and heart are the same. And so therefore you can really help others with this stuff. You remain just unflappable in the face of death, just doesn't really freak you out anymore. And so that's the other really important part is it's a fantastic way not only to help you prepare, but to help you help the loved ones that you're around with in this life.
Oh, that's beautiful. So truly a golden opportunity to practice kindness, compassion, and love, as you said, whether it's uh, our own journey or someone else's, someone that we love through the Bardo.
It's
It's
absolutely,
beautiful.
yeah, that's really what it comes down to, and when you look at the world in a really deep way, which is what we do in this program as well, and you strip away this absolutely ridiculous view of materialism. That's another reason we fear death. We fear death because life seems to be just this mere little blip, little hiccup on on this dead sea of lifeless matter is this little hiccup of life. Well, no, not at all. I mean, if you understand the nature of reality, it's actually not made of matter. It's made of heart, mind, spirit, and you can say it's actually made of the kind of the stuff of love. And so when you understand that, there's no place you can go when you die that's not made of heart, mind, spirit, love. There's no place you can go that's not conscious. And so we understand that again, it's just all about wrong view. We have such a adversarial or fearful relationship to death because we just don't know. I mean, that's why we're so afraid. But it's not just the Buddhist tradition. I mean, all the non-dualism traditions have variations of this kind of radical proclamation. But again, the real confidence comes from taking this material, working it into your tissues, using the practices, the contemplations. That's really the core, because that's when your body remembers. There's all this stuff these days. The best-selling book, your body keeps the score. Well, that's so true because your body is your unconscious mind. Well, the body is full of amazing, beautiful things. If you understand that the body is full of these things and you understand that the complete kind of stratified dimension of your being, and that's actually what's going to be revealed at the moment of death. And then the whole thing just becomes this joyride. It fundamentally amounts to the death of death. I mean, the illusion, death is just an illusion. Death is just the death of ignorance. It's the end of fake news. It's the end of ego. And that's because if you identify exclusively with form, which is what ego is, yeah, you're going to be afraid because that's all you think you are. But if you transition your identity to deeper, truer dimensions, then you realize you have nothing to fear at the moment of death. You actually have everything to look forward to. But again, kind of simple physics, causality, only if you're prepared. You can't expect to score your SATs at 800 if you haven't done any studies. So the preparation thing is key, and that really is highly empowering. You can do something about it. You can absolutely understanding the mechanics of the whole process, work with it, understand it, work it into your system, help others, and then at the end of life, just fundamentally celebrate. It's like, hee-haw, this is pretty cool.
Yeehaw. All right. So please do join us for this, practicing for this joyride together for Death and the Art of Dying, a deep dive into the Luminous Bardo. And this is a hybrid program, so an online option as well as an on-land option, August the 18th to the 24th. And thank you so much for joining me today, Andrew, and sharing your passion for this and your wisdom. And
Thank you, Jana. Yeah, I'm passionate about it because it's just so true, right? And everything about this is you can test it, see if it works for you. Nothing is taken on face value. But I think when people start to understand, they get a little bit excited and passionate about it themselves. So delightful to spend some time with you. I really look forward to being back on the land at EMC and exploring these teachings in even more detail.
thank you.
Take care.